Okay, it is 6:30 on the dot, so why don't we call to order at 6:30? And Devin, if we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. Just asking everyone to unmute here.
Should we wait for a graphic, Devin, or just go ahead?
Oh, is it not showing up?
No.
I see
have
it.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh. Well, I don't know. I see the agenda still. That's all right. We'll go with it.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Of the
United
States
of
of
America,
and to the republic
which stands
for which it stands,
under
nation,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
and
and justice for all.
all.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Okay, I'll ask everybody else to go back on mute at this time. I think everybody can handle that themselves. At this point, I would like to open the meeting up for public comment. So again, with our procedure as normal, if you would like to speak at public comment, if you could please raise your hand, and Devin will make sure you have the ability to unmute and speak and provide your comment at this time. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time, right, Devin? You don't see anything?
Nope.
Okay, all right, so we'll move right on to item D of the agenda, which is the minutes. So if I could please get a motion to approve the attached June 10th, 2020 minutes.
So moved. Johnny Carrier.
I'll second it, Sharon Mazzocchi.
Okay, any discussion? All right, and if we could just unmute for approval.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay, unanimously approved. Next item of business is correspondence. We have not received any correspondence. I have not received anything personally, and we have not received anything via the web form as well during this time period. So we do encourage people, obviously, the community keep engaged. Please, if you do have questions, anything at all, as you're reviewing the website or any comments or questions, please forward them on to us. We are more than happy to read comments or ask questions. All right, then we'll move right on to reports. Very first item is chair report. Going to be very quick tonight. The one thing that I did want to mention during the chair report this evening is, if we remember from last month, we did have an order of business that Garth did move on from our committee since he did relocate. And our new replacement will be named by town council in September. So I did want to give an update on that to make sure people knew the progress and what was going on. That is an evaluation process that happens, and you know, something that town council, obviously it is on their plate to have that discussion and move that forward. So I have confirmed that that's something that will happen in the September timeframe, just to keep everybody updated on where we are with that process. That was all I had for chair reports. So we can move right on to communications subcommittee. And I think probably makes sense for me to give that update from our meeting last time. So just a quick update on that. The subcommittee met immediately after our last meeting in June, so that was on June 11th, to review the website updates. That was primarily our focus for that conversation, was the website updates and further communication. So we did have an update, a very small update in both the townwide newsletter and in the school newsletter. So we are continuing with that process, but we do now have a draft of a new landing page that we did get assistance from both CSG and TSKP, which we really appreciate. And so that's something that we'll be sharing with the communications committee tomorrow. We do have a meeting following this one tomorrow morning, as well as a draft of the corresponding card that will go out to the all community members, announcing that they can actually get out to that website and look up updates and get more information. So there's definitely more to come on this. We've seen some great progress. I think people will be very happy with the updates and the suggestions that have been made. Nothing has been changed on the website right now. This is just a mock-up so that we can make sure everybody's clear on what the purpose is. It really streamlines the page look right on the landing page. It's very easy to find information, and that was the goal. So more to come on that, but just as a quick update, that was discussions last week on next steps for our meeting tomorrow. We will then review that mock-up and the postcard and then move forward on making all those updates happen. Anything else anybody else wanted to add? Oh, I have one more thing on communications as well, but is there anything else anybody on the call wanted to add on communications from last time? Okay, my only other update around that was one of the things we've talked about too in preparation, using our time wisely over the next, over these couple months that we're in kind of this small pause in the process is making sure that we're prepared for when we fully re-engage in this process. And I think the important part of that is our communications and our communication strategy. If you do remember, a couple months ago, we did have a conversation about bringing on tall timbers, and we did approve that as a board, or as a committee, excuse me, to have them engage with us to help with communications planning and the like. So that's something that we're going to start moving forward with as well, have some additional conversations on when's the best time to bring them on. And so I also want to remind people that that is part of our conversations and something that I think is critical to our success moving forward. So we're going to hear more about that. I hope to have a better update on that maybe for next month's meeting for us, so that we know when they're going to come on board and when we can see them engage and really get us with a good solid plan in place for communications as we move towards referendum. So I wanted to provide that update as well as far as communications. So we will have a sub-communications meeting tomorrow morning with next steps, and you know, we should see some outcomes from that meeting as well. Okay, if anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so we'll move right on to item 3, which is Board of Education Liaison Report. Beth, is there an update for you guys?
Not too much, given it's summer, but we did have a special meeting. I don't think there was anything related to the high school project covered, but you know, we are meeting as necessary throughout the summer, given things. But the Board of Education newsletter, we had a communications meeting, and we talked about that the BOE newsletter is going to be arriving. Now it'll be just a few days, right, to everyone in the community. So that'll be hitting mailboxes. And I think you mentioned that will include a building committee update.
Correct.
So people should be getting that message in a lot of different ways. We hope they'll see at least one to get completely up to date on the pause.
Yes, yeah, between, hopefully with those two, we know those are 2 of our most read
Yes.
publications, which is great. So we're hoping that will give them at least an indication of, you know, some of the decisions and what was made as far as time is concerned, and then hopefully with this follow-up with more information, then we can really get people re-engaged.
Right. So that was it.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to number 4, Town Council Liaison Report. Chris, anything specifically you'd like to
Well, consistent with what you said, Meg, in your report, we will be considering Garth's replacement. We received some expressions of interest and recommendations, so that's underway right now. We'll be reporting back in, September when as you said. Really, we met last night, and I think the only thing of relevance to this committee is that Kathy Blonsky did report in that, I can't give you anything more than just a very general statement that, the tax office is open and they have been very busy. So there was a sign of optimism that, in the very, very early stages of tax payments being made, that it was, very busy. So we're taking that as, cautious optimism that, the financial situation for the town will hopefully proceed in good fashion and good stead in the next, couple months over the deferment period.
And then, Chris, just unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the meeting last night. So was there a discussion on, so how is that reported out? Will there be more formal report on it, like in August, once you have more data?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll get, there really wasn't much. In terms of just, percentages or dollar values, it just is too early to say, other than just having a general statement that Kathy seemed to be very pleased with the level of activity and payments being made. So, but I'll be able to better crystallize it probably in the August timeframe. Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, anybody have any questions or anything for Chris at this time? Okay, all right, so we'll move right on to item 5, state legislative update. I think probably we're best to maybe turn this over to CSG at this point to see if there's anything that they're aware of, through their dealings with the state, or anything else that they might have heard of that they can provide any updates on at this time.
Meg, this is Chris Cycli. No, there's been no changes effectively from the state's perspective regarding these grant submissions. None of the dates have changed. Everything is still moving as it's been.
Okay.
Chris, other towns are still submitting or have submitted their application dates for that and have met that deadline. I think it's important to let the committee know.
Correct. Yes, other towns did submit their grant applications for their respective varying projects, and everyone met the June 30th deadline. Mm-hmm. There are some towns that are still moving forward with October and November referendums for their school projects. So.
Okay. Any questions for Chris or Mark from the committee?
I have a question. It's Michael Smith. What's your understanding if an application, it sounds like, a lot of applications come in just before the June 30th deadline. What's your understanding of applications that come in earlier in the state's fiscal year? Should there be one that's presented in October, November, December? How is that? Do they act upon the application as it's received, or will it be shelved until all applications are received by the deadline of June 30, 21?
Yes, it would be shelved. If it's an application similar to ours, which is a priority project, then yes, it would be shelved until the following June 30th deadline.
So even though we may be poised to move sooner than that, there's really only one time that anything advances, and that's after June.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not from us, Meg.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Industry update. I knew we do have our TSKP partners on the line here. I don't know if there's anything they'd like to share as far as anything they've been hearing, conversations, working with other districts, anything else that might be relevant for us to understand around anything industry related at this time.
Meg, hi, this is Richard. And hello to everyone. It's been a while. So I just want to report on a couple of things. One is we did do the schematic design report, and we were hoping that that could be available to members of the community as well as published on your website. And I don't know if we're finished getting comments back from the committee, but it would be good to wrap that up. So if there are comments forthcoming, it would be great to have a deadline, establish a deadline, and then publish it. That doesn't mean that we can't issue amendments to the schematic report subsequently, but it would be good to get it in a form that the committee has approved so that we can actually then publish it in various forms. I'm not sure where we left that. I know Michael is on the line as well. Michael, can you chime in on any comments about that?
Well, thank you, Richard, and hello, everyone. We've folded into the report the comments that we've received to date, which were insightful but not numerous. And in theory, we could press print again on this report and be ready to give it to the communications subcommittee tomorrow morning. That said, Richard is correct. We're not quite certain whether you want to keep the comment period open.
I would say, and people can certainly chime in on this if they feel, but I think based on our communication or our conversation last time, and if we haven't heard anything as of yet, as long as the updates made from our conversation last time were made, I think that was where we left it. And does everybody else agree, or does anybody disagree with that?
Well, there's nothing, this is Richard again, there's nothing wrong with publishing it and then having it available for public comment as well. And
Yep.
Then once we get public comment, then I think this could be a good tool to use to solicit comments, to announce to the folks that the schematic report is out there and that it summarizes the findings of your efforts, and that we would welcome public participation and public comment during this pause period. And as I say, we could certainly issue addenda or republish it with an updated date. So I would encourage the committee to release it. I mean, I think the public would like to see a final product.
Okay, we will confirm that tomorrow in communications subcommittee, just make sure everybody's on the same page, and then we can certainly even get that up there now with a link out, and make sure that it's part of our. It's certainly going to be part of our changes to the landing page as well.
Right. The second thing I would like to bring up has to do with discussions about COVID-19 measures in school planning. And that's a subject that's going to come up, I'm sure, in the public when we resume public presentations. So yesterday we had an interesting meeting with the state reviewing schematic design on another project, which was done using Zoom. And it was a very fruitful meeting. But I found that the plan reviewers from the state were extremely eager to know what school planners and particularly engineers were doing these days about mitigating the spread of virus. And so at that meeting, I had invited Craig Raza. Craig, you may recall, is with Kohler Ronan. He happens to be the engineer on the Farmington High School project. And he talked about the ultraviolet germicide irradiation techniques that they're using right now in HVAC systems. It's basically an ultraviolet system that kills germs and bacteria. And it's a technique that's a lot of people are using now to retrofit HVAC systems. There's another technique that they're using, a bipolar filtration system, which basically uses electrostatic technology. You put a positive charge on one element, a negative charge on another element in the filter, and as air passes through this filtration system, particles in the air which are charged then get attracted to the filter. It was a very interesting conversation, and the state was extremely interested in that technique. So I think at some point we should probably give the committee an update and maybe invite Craig Raza on the kinds of things that he's been doing on other facilities so that we're better prepared when we meet before the public to address their concerns. So I just wanted to share that experience with you.
Is that something, Richard, you think we should put on the agenda for August? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think let's do that. Let's put it on the agenda, and then if you could, what I can do is ask Craig Raza to be present, and then we can talk about those techniques as well as other kinds of things. We did also reach out to ASSA ABLOY, the hardware manufacturers, about what sorts of things they're developing for touchless hardware to be used on doors. I think that in the future, bathrooms are going to be an item of great scrutiny. And so I think the public would be interested to know what kinds of hardware is being developed in the future. So I'll try to assemble some literature about that for the August meeting as well.
Great. I think that would be a good conversation for us to have in August. And it sounds like does it sound like to you guys that the filtration piece is kind of the biggest topic of conversation right now?
Well, it was just Craig. I will certainly try to find out more whether there are other techniques that are being used. But yeah, I mean, the state was very, very interested in this because the reviewers have not really come up with any sort of standards. We did talk to them about whether or not the state is going to consider those kinds of features as additional reimbursable items. In other words, if a project adds these kinds of features, would that be eligible for reimbursement above and beyond the regular rate? And they said no. They didn't think that was going to become another item in the reimbursables list for extra reimbursement. As far as square footage is concerned, we also asked whether or not the state would consider additional square footage allocations, knowing that in the future, the density of classrooms may become an issue in reducing the spread of viruses. So if you're reducing the density in classrooms, that requires more square footage. But again, they said, no, there was no discussion about changing the square footage guidelines for eligibility.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Richard or Michael at this time?
Meg, it's Michael. I'm not so sure as much as a question as maybe a suggestion to piggyback onto what Richard's offered as more information that could be shared in August around what are some new design standards. There's a part of me that is delighted that Richard's an optimist and asking the folks in the division that he's working with within the government, if they're forward thinking about will more square footage be added. So it's good to be optimistic that way. I imagine that the coming year will be very telling in terms of how that that question may be replied differently. And so I think it's important just over the course of the next year to keep asking that question as we learn more things as we get into the fall. But the other part that I was hoping that we might add, perhaps under this category of industry update, would be some information around what's going on within the practice of construction for schools right now. It may be helpful to reach out to some folks who are working in this space to get their sense of perhaps timing and opportunity. I had the opportunity to talk with some folks who do school construction at the beginning of this week. And it was interesting to hear their reflections on comparing where we are now to where we were in 2008 with an economic downturn, and what were the cycles and when did we come out of them? And based upon that experience, what was going on with subs, what was going on with the cost of materials. You know, they were already beginning to feel some upward pressure on materials that felt like, you know, they were quantifying as 1% increases, wood starting to go up. But they were also offering some commentary on school projects that are happening now, looking at, you know, on average about a 3% decrease in what they were previously getting from subs. I think that kind of information will truly be helpful to in our communications, but also in how we help to advise the town council in terms of timing when it comes to what might we predict in the way of construction opportunities, because I think that's, you know, we've kind of had our focus on this on the schematic design, which is appropriate, but as we get into a longer term planning, that, you know, nothing's going to happen soon now based upon when you know, nothing probably for about a year that we can truly advance. And so whatever we can gather over the coming year and how we quantify it from a communications perspective and also back to town council, I think that'd be useful as an overall industry update. So it doesn't have to happen in August, but if we could begin to start to figure out where we're going to get trending information, I think that might be helpful.
Meg, this is Richard again. May I respond?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So you raise good points, Michael. So we've been trying to get that same kind of information from the industry. So we've been working with a couple of cost estimators, and we asked them specifically that question. So what do you see trending right now? Has COVID-19 affected costs? Should we be adjusting our cost estimates because of COVID-19? And I get differing opinions. So the consensus, I think, when I've had those conversations with cost estimators, that as of this point, there isn't evidence enough for us to go back and, let's say, adjust a cost estimate. So if the town council were to ask me today, okay, look, we've seen this COVID-19 impact our lives, should we be adjusting our cost estimate for the Farmington High School project? So if I had to answer tonight, it would be no. I don't see any evidence based upon the feedback I've gotten from cost estimators that we should be adjusting that cost estimate. We are having a project go out to bid in late August. We may get bid results sometime in September. And that might be the first actual indicator for our office about what's going on. This happens to be a large project that will be in West Springfield, I'm sorry. And there's a great deal of interest in it by bidders. So we'll see. We'll see how the actual bid results are and compare that to our cost estimates and see if in fact, the market has changed because of COVID-19. But as of tonight, I can't say that there has been an effect.
And I think what you're outlining is a process that I think we ought to just begin to consider ourselves how do we gather data? What are those sources of data so that we don't make things anecdotal or based upon, one or two people's opinions. And I think the other piece that I'm trying to figure out how we may do some level of forecasting, there is going to be a certain phase based upon what's going on economically now, what's trending to happen over the next couple of quarters, is that if we follow a pattern of where there's an economic downturn, and from a planning perspective, you don't have as much work, and I don't mean you at your firm, but if architects aren't as engaged, that's going to be a cycle so how many projects are going to come in the pipeline in 2 years? So I'm not only wanting to get what are the pieces that are going to emerge over the next couple of quarters in terms of where were projects originally forecast, how active is the sub-market, what is that doing in terms of downward pressure on people who want this work. But I'm also just trending out 2 years to say, if things start to freeze now from a planning perspective over the course of the next year, what does that mean for a project that may be ready, to hit the ground in 2022? So I'd like to gather data that's real time now, but also that may be based upon historical trends of when we were in periods of economic recession in 2008. How long did it take? What was there were some projects that obviously were in the pipeline in 2008 and 2009 that got completed, but what happened in 2010, 2 years out from an economic downturn? So I'd like to kind of look backward to be able to help us to forecast forward. And I also want to gather some real-time stuff that helps in our own analysis, in the town council's analysis, and in a way that we can educate the public of what becomes an opportune time to perhaps take advantage of some maybe predictable patterns of what could happen based upon rather recent historical trends and what's happening in real time. So it isn't so much a matter of kind of wanting an answer today. I don't know that ultimately has a relevance to any sort of decisions that we make, but more, who are we looking to for sources of data? What patterns are we looking at that can give us some predictive pattern of where might we be in 2022? And is that a space of great advantage for us potentially from a financing perspective and a construction cost perspective?
Okay, Michael, I'm on it.
Thanks.
We'll add, Michael, as kind of almost a subtopic on the industry updates, kind of cost forecasting, and talk a little bit more, like you said. I think we need to do a little bit better definition around that process, so we're not just, trying to pull data out anywhere. That doesn't make sense, but that it really makes sense on getting results that is helpful for us. So I think we can continue the conversation, figure out how best to pull that together too, and help Richard with his efforts. Okay, anything else? Any other questions regarding industry updates, or actually anything within the reports now that we've kind of heard quite a bit of information during the reports? Anything else anybody has any questions on or that they wanted to bring up at this time? Okay. Devin, I just had one question around, I'm assuming at this time we are still moving forward for online meetings for the foreseeable future. Is there any discussion or conversation around that?
That's correct. For the time being, we're still going to be doing everything via Zoom.
Okay.
I still haven't heard anything about changing that. But if I do hear something, I'll let everyone know as soon as I hear anything.
Okay, and we know that there's kind of some additional steps we need to take if that is the case, and we can have a conversation around whether we have the ability even to do a kind of a hybrid meeting if it requires it as well. But just wanted to make sure we kept having that conversation as well if there was any changes in the way we were going to continue to execute.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Devin, how's Kat doing?
She's doing good. She's actually coming back soon. End of the month, she's going to be coming back part-time for a couple weeks. So last week of July, she'll be in. So she should be at our next meeting.
Great.
Okay. All right. One last opportunity if there's any other questions or thoughts from anybody in the committee at this time before I ask for a motion for adjournment. Okay. All right. So if I could ask for that motion for adjournment.
Sharon Mazzocchi, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second, John Carrier.
With somebody else too. All right. Any discussion? All right. Motion for adjournment at 7:06. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Unanimously approved. We adjourn at 7:06. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time and the commitment to the project moving forward. And we'll have some updates, obviously, for our meeting in August.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.